No. Now are we all good?
No.
Just wait for Saul to tell you he's good, and then you can start. Jesus.
I'm getting ace. It's okay.
Let's try it.
Stay calm.
Can you go? Icing the 1AC is a strong shrug.
What do you say?
Icing the 1AC.
Word's working now. It's just not going.
Something with plot trend.
This isn't 2000.
Jason has one.
My point
Kinda
exactly.
Yeah.
I actually may have one.
Well, fingers crossed for internet first.
Oh, there it is.
Don't make the rest of the round much.
I got it.
Yeah.
Well,
if
he's
you
got his.
No, I know.
Bernstein's eager.
I mean, I respect that.
Okay, we're good.
Okay. Advanced what is cost federal regulatory authority creates inefficient and fragmented payment models that is compressed and 17 degree fragmentation is striking redundancy and excessive use of services commonizes lack of data sharing the key is continuous improvement which control the basic rising cost harnessing Medicare's financial leverage and regulatory influence could lead to system-wide improved incentives reinforce costly and efficient care based on managed FMS ACOs on to achieve efficiency that can need to be paid according to Medicare fee schedules bundle payment models make and make a single combined with a road coordination lower cost strategies make providers liable promote value over false shortage shutting out for service instead of Medicare directly affect the care over all Americans and has risen already high stakes Medicare prevalently influence hospitals physicians and supply size driven fragmentation and lacking coordination leading to redundancy and inefficiency about our pressure would combine provider payment policy with stronger economic incentives for beneficiaries long term purpose and healthier cost will collapse the economy. There's no one cause of horror with an 18 if the US budget collapse and the main goal will be rising healthcare costs and aside from spending outlook spending ultimate minimum costs are second climate unaffordable truly catastrophic with the rest of Africa so the purpose and healthcare costs they jump into supply of death amount 15 trillion part of this age that are cracking only makes sense for 10 to 15 years the way will start to cost they last the field department certainly different when you turn healthier Medicaid subsidies will never shrink or stabilize cost of welfare 65% more important than elderly Americans is cost of raising per capita health costs after faster than GDP while costs rising more slowly this won't last there's no stable future for the future and the future is racing between rising health costs and economic raise the economy is losing each time health costs outpace GDP creates excessive growth which means not only that absence of workable solution spending will sink the federal budget generate debt that would hold back the economy spreading global economic confidence and ability to borrow nuclear war China 2015 independence raising the cost of conflict leaders seriously anticipate their decline may let excellent defense will pay any for time long life for and reviews we determine the arms shift to happen abruptly the greatest person change the world economy the only factor protecting our begin to turn to lose credibility healthcare driven budgetary overstretch cause global instability around 30 budget deficits or like these 70 overstretch deficit demand and fiscal amounts and chronic things trigger growth and happening altering overstretch the data primary system not blind deficit the US based technology just not primarily out of control defense spending and endemic raising an explosive economy wide healthcare costs for public health insurance real fiscal time where the material foundation US power being healthcare driven fiscal deficit that's necessary overstretch this guy the root of fiscal bottom of unstickable commitments and public expenditure maintaining structural power and engagement key to maintaining an evolving world order the alternative is war given 18 world US in the international system it is fundamental importance US benefit enormously engaging with pursuing strategies and trade cover that advance interest own and falls promoting global peace and stability that however appears to be unraveling out of dependence of the current world order under threat from multiple sources the question is character and magnitude that change all the categories in something world order shifting before eyes absent any legitimate order I work global attention I'm not sure to zero somewhere I trust in discount where no overarching set of rules are available to a recipe for disorder more even where only the absolute cost containment call under attempting healthcare costs so much costs are hitting the account economic like design system. So it involves the golden rule of economics and who pays next to gospel we can only if they are directly connecting with the person not paying for the healthcare is paying government, individual insurance companies, healthcare, houses, unmanageable blend of all three in which who decides who pays, or disconnecting the multi-rated plan means the golden rule that either social cost control comes to individuals again, individuals are paying making decisions about what time, how much they're regulated market control monetary property is not a reasonable system, or spending sustainable, staying well, and any realistic multi-pay system I will involve government represents the debate is about whether the central institutional circle emphasizes bottom up consumer control, reasonable system requires consumer cost transparency and equal burning and reflects economic cost of providing care. Thus, the plan the United States federal government should establish national health insurance that requires enrollment, creates a comprehensive framework for value-based reimbursement, including financial subsidy, stabilization methods. Only the absolute combination of federal insurance and payroll reform solves and stabilizes the cost of market for reporting on value-based and good health. Is inherently less common. Universal coverage, research, and over friendly and related national expanded access to improved value. Unstable country, the universal coverage based rapidly on rising housing must and covers any person's companies based on health plan reporting will help treat plans on the basis of volume of surgery, assuming insurance will drive more effectively monopolies employers, fostering competition and driving improvement in ways that are difficult for government entities. Everyone must be required to purchase health insurance. This will bring substantial new revenues, lowering payments, reducing the far long-term driver from restricting delivery where most value creating cost of dissemination outcomes should become mandatory that primary care providers are acting deliver distant services to accessibly broad population delivery. Fragment and effective and efficient we need a reimbursement system that aligns everyone interest around improving value reimbursement must be disable covering the entire cycle of care or highest priorities that is to finalize and continuously improve continuously update health information technology standards mandated enrollment is key stabilizes market and contains cost on it low rates have the penalties associated with the individual mandate or intended maximize coverage over uninsured and attract the healthiest individuals insurers for adverse source area but alternative would take the income of the uninsured into account sure puts the tax model using modified version starters and Medicare Part B and Part D the premium would approximately the size of the mandate penalties that sure should make the penalty strong enough to maximize the world we get and also people events we're making coverage over expensive high for distribution high for distribution rates are achieving amplitude with improved growth increasing penalties and improving affordability have to affect most individuals uninsured or example penalties because they don't have access to qualifying coverage that this will require increasing federal financial system to make coverage less costly insured increase operating tax rates and cost rates no approach with tax rates to the low level which reducing deductibles collections and part maximums making marketplace coverage more reliable and affordable increase enrollment improve rules reduce deductibles financial burdens and improve access to care advantage to its regulations regulatory certainty for value-based care is key to genomic testing and precision medicine breast thank you 21 covering the cost of testing emerging therapies can be a challenge out here so to commit to reimbursement and treatment and many are on the fence about genetic testing many people don't have access to precision medicine because insurance offer coverage cares about significant interest increasing accessibility every stakeholder the chance for genetic testing has values is rewarding us success across the larger population and industry moves in a worse user reimbursement and people transition FMS is key to biomedical innovation they know all 70 rapid innovation transform the 30 stakeholders are calling for new reimbursement that align people to value FMS I can more costly run the innovative care VPP encourage I showed up to improve outcomes including better evidence on treatment advancing innovative care models these agreements I showed link with actual results these reason rates a lot parties through life financial assistance especially effective of my health doesn't BBB are in the emphasis in their FT I know the protocols involve US laws and regulation aspects of US statutory regulation and thing all complicated implementation but really down to federal pricing and coordination restricting prevent value-based innovation Daniel Roll 70 that value-based family line pricing documents and contracts required by little change in data stakeholders expressing sort of sharing information into regulatory and 70 impeding wise reduction indicate by rules intended for current rules not considered frame models for products in which reimbursement depends on the measure of value is only for AVP agreements and increased value depends on coordination and sharing data by risk and clarification as well as regulatory and legislative reforms IT should would align with earlier reform and greater insurance and support for innovative products we recommend Congress advance legal center incentivize development and adoption regulatory innovation to support the innovation technologies providing a clear pathway for aligning manufacturing and provide a deliver better outcomes and avoid unnecessary cost value-based reimbursement is key to precision medicine diagnostics analogs innovation garrison and cost and 70 healthcare markets how use price is different and then is different than other markets health markets are right for the uncertainty push for innovation and improvement better match the fitting condition of the treatment that this is personalized health we made for health improvement outputs innovation there's an exhaustion most of the pull the pull potential IP manufacturing charge with the market will be one important economic reality changing development the present influence of the US marketplace manufacturing of the percent reimbursement are negotiating rising personal reimbursement diagnostic in the US has been different reimbursement is operated by a measure cost-based something the diagnostic value is not considered like a value-based reimbursement is very high developed test out the product is on the market if they cannot raise the money for decent design they cannot proceed flexible value-based reimbursement reduce the impact this very the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and combination each essential to value channel surpass the US and resistant medicine guarantees by defense vulnerability school accepting the China plans to become the next genomic power house China's ambition is to lead resistant medicine there's things economic incentives are boosted inherently do the also project to deconfigure the nation arsenal using AI as part of the SDD components around defense increasing vaccines antibiotics and targeted treatments personalized medicine media personalized biotech and newly viruses high during the visibility I define these identity markers require significant Chinese investment in technology a Chinese advantage in healthcare AI launch into a new military capability guaranteed his count Canadian 70 China supports the US and AI take advantage of unique opportunity to check for military capability advances AI will impact future military strategic balance advances enable cutting tech dominance not realized with how the contestant the Chinese military approach AI will influence the trajectory of PLA intent to take advantage of the military civil integration intelligence warfare will require attention to force development of modernization and enhance the PLA capability to process and utilize information at scale and machine speed the PLA could utilize AI to enhance command and control at the operational and strategic levels and knowledgeization. Universal AI trend towards battlefield singularity. The U.S. emphasis on human and might be feasible for future warfare. Machines and AI appeal to the PLA way to circumvent position issues. Constantly leadership to rely more upon AI technologies to become critical force multiplier for China's future military capabilities. Shift away from FMS is key. Allen 17, the innovation and challenge by resource and unwilling decide towards the new tech does not provide media FMS or revenues and major challenge for several behavioral changes of the Black Western drug and digital health around the world. Harm the industry, overseeing hospital after hospital, taking credible loss and have widespread layoffs. Many healthcare entrepreneurs are single believe dropping in the problem will somehow lead to innovation, but often needs to find solution exists. The key to adoption and identifying the correct part of entry and fit these seamlessly into existing workflows and healthcare policy. The policy is starting culture of reckless high priority acting. Adoption of EHR was under 9%. Thanks to the carrier and second incentives and adoption is 90% policy changes should drive innovation to represent and will drive quality outcomes. Obviously, provide us more holistically when investing in tech innovation will have a strong collaboration. This starts line humanity stands to drive a normal platform from AI, biotech, solve the ADR.
Don't read that. I should have disclosed it if we were going to read it because we already read it. Did you read the last time?
Reimbursement change necessarily increase insurance warranty to reduce investment in demand uncertainty. Garrison 2070, the most significant element of insurance governing new tech as part of the benefit package means protection against financial losses as well as against risk of significant health loss. A very important element is the reduction in uncertainty in the likelihood when survival prospects are poor and some over innovation with lower life extension, scientific skills, knowledge analyses and assessment level, even failure to provide benefit from the health system.
We need to read the ABR stuff.
Gotcha. I have a few questions about this AI warfare stuff. So the internal link says that AI means that we can develop machine learning algorithms that predict the effects of certain genes on the ability to reproduce diseases. What on earth does that mean in the context of warfare?
Well, our evidence says that would allow for personalized bioattacks that can be used within warfare.
So China gets a whole bunch of really smart people. They figure out which gene is super important for like super aid flu, whatever.
Well, it's super aid flu that's going to be implicating every single one of the U.S. military, so they would be able to target specific
so here's the scenario. They attack the military, which means everyone in our military gets super AIDS flu, and then what happens?
Then we lose a war to China, and we're all
going to die. Then we lose a war to China because all of our soldiers have super AIDS flu. So
except for the U.S. is going to retaliate in that situation.
So it's about bioterror retaliation by China?
Well, the Kanye card is also about how AI spills over to other sectors.
Yeah, which is why this scenario makes no sense. It says these advances will be enabled by technology transfer, overseas investments, and acquisitions focused on cutting-edge strategic technologies. So if China's really focusing on tech acquisition overseas of machine learning geared towards warfare, why on earth is personalized medicine key to solve?
Well, the U.S. is able to keep up and generate defense mechanisms against that gene warfare technology that China is trying to develop.
So keeping up with China is based off of developing vaccines to their specific diseases, right?
Well, it's being able to have that new innovation in precision medicine.
Okay, what machine learning algorithm do you think is going to beat super AIDS flu bugs?
I mean, like, that's the whole point of innovation, is that we innovate to create that new technology so that we can prevent super AIDS flu.
Gotcha. So the like cost stuff, it says there's inefficient and fragmented payment models in the status quo. Which piece of evidence says that causes a spiraling of healthcare costs sufficient to trigger your cost evidence?
Looking over the majority of our evidence says that the rising healthcare costs as a result of the fee-for-service system collapse.
It says, quote, the problem is linked to entitlements. If the U.S. budget collapses after hemorrhaging too much red ink, the main culprit will be rising healthcare costs.
I would refer you to the Horowitz evidence. If the U.S. budget collapses, the main culprit will be rising healthcare costs. Rising healthcare costs will collapse the U.S. budget because those healthcare costs.
Okay, so to be clear, it's about entitlement spending in the U.S., like Medicare and Medicaid.
Well, that's part of it. It's also just the fact that healthcare costs are exceeding the amount of.
Okay, so if that's true and that's the healthcare costs internally, that's important. Why on earth is certainty in the private market sufficient to solve for that?
Well, our evidence indicates that one, we would lead to a transition within the public market as well, and also
so there's a whole bunch more
reduce the price of health.
Okay, gotcha. So it's about reforming the payment model within Medicare and Medicaid.
It's also about reforming the payment model within private industry. We think that Medicare and Medicaid dictate the way that policy.
The budget. I have one last question. The deficit is super, super big. When do we start withdrawing our military?
I mean, I can't give you the exact number, but eventually there are going to be military cuts that we.
Yeah, what's the threshold when we decide?
I can't give you the exact number. I don't know how.
Can you ballpark it?
Sending it out. Sorry. 1 sec. I just need to look at that.
Okay.
kicks off cost, then the regulation damage. I'm gonna just get a higher stand going right now, so we don't have to switch it.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. 4 costs red.
6.
Also, there are 7 headers in here. Did you mean 7?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, there's 6 in here.
There's 7.
1,
Mine
2,
is
3, 4, 5, 6.
Is that 7?
Then
Yeah, it's probably sent out the wrong doc.
I probably just saved it. Let me send another one out.
Just checking.
It's that. Yeah. Try this one. Mine has 6. Saul's a math major though, so
Math major.
your stats major. So sort of this.
Yeah, that looks right.
Everyone good?
Dems win now, plan what's a Robin 3 and 2. The 20 he's gonna be a change election of the Republicans gonna keep control the heavy candidates and they're not doing that. The evidence of a big blue wave that 60% disapprove as species, not popular Republicans need to develop an agenda. One issue is healthcare voters want relief folks might be changed from appealing to Obama to rather than wayfind to bring the cost down to McConnell Ryan can provide the form and impetus for making them reality get focus off Trump and onto ideas that Trump can always come along later, claim credit, climb progress coming down, Dems key to put back flooding wood, cash out Warren Peterson, 26 a little bit warming. I would say that emissions have to peak by 2020. What happens in 2018 will be key. The transition's already underway. The EVs can happen quickly and exponentially when Trump announced the pledge withdrawal. The international community responded by voicing even more support than Trump. First announcement inspired swift reaction from the state cities and businesses, universities, trying to think of their own climate action futures, market huge challenges remain taken. It needs to be implemented enormous amount of climate progress, or at least mitigation or worse outcomes hinge on the midterm election, which should depend on more climate-friendly party. It's existential. Pod S17, Trump will make climate change worse. Taking steps to increase dependence on oil. Literally, it looks like our weekend vehicle. This vehicle standards Trump ATM marble agenda is a great danger to the planet. Trump presents an existential threat to inherent leadership on state and local level, bridge gap to federal level, but only for the period of time the administration appears not beyond the rainbow. Say that Trump's pulled corporate interests under states. Out of the congressional midterm 2018 since powerful signals of climate action will be held accountable for that. The stakes in the fight to defend the climate policies. They on all of us to stop Trump from selling our planet next office vague. They say don't specify financing reverse covered benefits by presumption. It locks in bureaucratic waste on 17 and leaks here's guaranteed work the devil's in the details and with the tight discussion what service security for who is and how the decisions are made and how the cost will be controlled. This legitimate and highly important excess of bureaucracy contribute to the organization they hear without the profound return. We'll do the same the single period any plan depend on details. AI app conditionality allows to receive the liquor offense which is voted for fairness. Next off is TNHS exclusive single payer Guzman 1990s broad definition health system provide traditional service fund national health insurance meaning the state function single payer the national health services meaning the state fund finances and provides the service both the control category encourages the mixture of the 3 vote and every precise limits any other interpretation opens the floodgates to linear different coverage financing scheme to overburdening the net crowd which decrease quality clash. Next off is the value-based payments is a quick shift to it. Collapses hospitals around the historically low margin due to Medicare days in 17 they lost in reduction services event. Go back comes into the way. The income drop the payment programs do not cover costs under payments for $57.8 billion in 2015 that attempts to fund fee for service to the value-based model poses too much serious challenge to the hospital struggling with Medicare models. Only 26% were meeting goals under the UK models. Only just 30% were meeting care coordination goals. The transition has been painful to see. Highly aggressive money moved to value-based care, weakening the margins for Medicare patients with hospital struggling. Historical to CMS should determine the benefits of value care. Here outweigh the cost. CMS should reap limited rewards. Shifted value-based payment collapses rural hospitals, communities, jacks up food prices, Allen, and 16 the value-based payment the problem matter. National security talent shortage make it impossible for rural health to transition without the talent for rural health. We're unable to deliver quality. Already struggling with the cost of additional vulnerable, but then going out of business. Healthcare is the largest employer. The community helps people move away. Rural America produces food that feeds the rest of the country when there's no way to work. The farm once food rise up, the price will go through the roof. Hyperinflation will become a reality upon you. Will be worthless overnight. Americans who are hungry. Price inflation, right to CCP. The call out CCP collapse will blame the West and unsuccessfully crack down pay and love. And the CCP is by fear that they can counter the big ways no market regime is performance-based legitimacy, unreliable rising food price inflation pretty clear. And certain Chinese leaders blame the Western influence as they did when they called the revolution toppled Ukraine, Georgia, and Kyrgyzstan. Likely the line of survival trade and soldier custody and the sustainability seems increasingly doubt the legitimacy and quickly. CCP class calls us over in new war in Asia. David and Nathan, it's unrest undermines the relationship. The economy been thrown into the recession where thoughts threaten the stability of South Korea and Japan create mismanagement by Russia and North Korea and produce humanitarian catastrophe and unprecedented history. And the prospects for Sino-American military confrontation become the real threat. The instability of leaders may not be able to control what happens. The implications are catastrophic if China's beset
climate disorder. There is no telling what regime may emerge a civil war by bringing about the hostile expansion time that armed with nuclear weapons pose an even greater threat to world stability than the strongest China is necessary to preserve Asian stability. One of the consequences will be millions of refugees pouring for the Chinese for the stability of the allies. We severely test North Korea plus military muscle dreadful. The results in ethnic minorities might break away the control of the nuclear weapons, making compromise the territorial disputes go to degenerate into armed warfare. Next off, the states can't blend. The 50 state government should establish national health insurance that requires enrollment income and creates a comprehensive framework for values, reimbursement, including financial stabilization measures, solves case, avoids backlash, calls follow on blush, and the grid like the federal level sign reforms state by state parks build the momentum towards nationwide cover successful state models. These the burdens employers become concerned about balkanization, the press congress of federalization, where they see demonstrating the power of feedback making blocking the national commitment in the White House, respond and imposing overarching federal scheme. Next off is the advantage counterplan and pick. The United States federal government should establish national health insurance that requires enrollment and uses global operating budgets to pay providers, including financial stabilization measures, to promote international synthetic biology norms in accordance with the NAGOA protocol, increase investment in synthetic biology, basic research funded by the STEM initiatives and incentives to discourage biotechnology companies offshoring anti-genetically modified organism legislation to maintain the regulation on synthetic biology products and methods was used to decrease such products substantially. Invest in synthetic biology research that aims to remove the antibiotic-resistant genes and disease and causing bacteria. Invest in research and development necessary to make the crops that yield more and modernize regulatory process for evaluating GMO crops. This capitalist section function competitive. It does not fiat bundle payment system, but it solves every single pair good argument. Global operating budgets are best will handle. And 18, the investment costs search to define per provider and use demand or system allocates investment regardless of the needs for trying to determine success. Serving the well-insured patient filling the best lucrative services and gaining the payment rule. All these rates costing over automatically equal as the coverage, but as long as possible pay from profits, others will persist. The value-based programs are gaming the system by upcoding and cherry picking. The way we work with data will be as close to the truth as the tax return. The only way to short circuit the distribution is to stop rewarding payments used only for care or not profits means paying the operating budget single payer fund investment through the separate grants and private payment models push the market-based incentives encourage the particular, but the system must stop working for profit. It solves biotech independence. They are author Grubble in 17 the issue fund basic research and financial incentives discourage all offshore workforce training programs and ensure that women are targeted and encourage the students does say this for the regulatory philosophy that focuses on the end product proven beneficial to innovation not precautionary model. The US should ensure the products are regulated. It also solves the synthetic biology. Their author is literally just writing about all the cool things that his blog does. 2015, that 5, the synthetic biology is rapidly advancing company's vision is rendered scientists made amazing breakthroughs that farmer are moving away. What if the bioengineers found a way to remove the resistant genes? Researchers are working to design new probiotics in time for synthetic biology has arrived. It solves for the rest of the planks are just preempts to add-ons they read. Now, the cost advantage, the economy is fully locked now. I'm at in 321 US economic outlook is healthy according to the key indicators most critical is GDP growth expected to be remain between 2 and 3% ideal range. Unemployment forecast to continue that and at the natural rate. There's not much inflation. The deflation that's fully locked the economy. The GDP growth takes into account the Trump's economic policies. The unemployment rate will drop like the Fed. The raise rates for the more normal level. Loose manufacturing is forecasted to increase total employment. Increase the fastest growth will occur in healthcare economy. Fully recover by the recession 2020 and healthcare is spending slowing down. Gooch until 1218 the healthcare spending increase to stabilize. Hospital spending is slowed. Has slowed according to the Ultra and also national healthcare spending has remained between 17.9% and 18.1%. That hospital spending is growth until the senior economists and fellows said that growth average 3.3 compared to 4.7 in 2016. The HC spending growth at 4 is lower than the previous projection. Healthcare price growth remained unchanged at the slowest growth rate since December 2015. It's sustainable. It doesn't drag growth down. Graham in 16 that health critics claim the system is too expensive for an honor economy. This is misleading according to new research. Not clear that spending is important given our very high national income. That compared to developed countries, Americans with higher income after subjecting healthcare since 1960. US outperform all except Norway, especially the not just subjecting health share GDP allocated health and however, this has no impact on the ability of the economy to deliver high GDP. The GDP for other goods and services is increasing through health spending influence growth for versus too simple the wage and price of the resources allocated to the healthcare or the consequence of activity in other parts of the economy. The solving argument across X that there's no threshold for when deficits kill hedge, no economic clarity, and 15 the economic crisis is considered behavior sort of pressures and there's kind of defense and crisis and crisis encourage reasonably lead to deflation for prioritization crisis increased benefit from trade and investment at least elected leaders capable of resolving difficulties predicting heterodox foreign policy more likely to leader prefer conciliatory policies. They don't solve Trump who disengaged from the international order and there's no hedge in February 17 that notion these powers are responsible for the new peace system but the belief is strong best we need to examine the proposition is that not the world is the measurable rationality but the human mind is political so I can shed more light on the faith and the hedge is really subject to analysis beliefs of an internalist beliefs and not best we sense leaders are motivated I act based on unjustified inaccurate beliefs for intelligent financially lead to disastrous outcome status provides Americans with psychological wars as well as incentives to turn the rational for preserving the unipolar motives successful to receiving guidance whether with the data in line with their such not consequent coincidence of hedge stability theories or American satisfaction that comes with being the unipolar power has inspired Americans to misperceive the positive role healthcare costs are dropping Q in 317 the costs are growing more slowly than other things just 1.8% of the labor barely half the prior 12 months below the 2.2% inflation for all the today's market be a profound shift to disinflation gave away to outright deflation set to have been falling for a first time baby boomers are graduating in Medicare this put downward pressure on the price because Medicare is less than have been millennials are too young and need too much care and the online shopping pricing comparison is very different. The regs advantage innovations at an all-time high for 17. The U.S. is recognized as a leader in biopharma innovation built on the advanced R&D, the economic impact translated into high wage jobs and tax revenue. Economic output every job is supported by $5 additional R&D with critical patent in this biopharma. Invest more than R&D. The sector comes with a single large share of the R&D, not only the U.S. lead in drive to be every in early stage in research, but also within the IP more than half all the new medicines. The U.S. leads in by peer-reviewed publication, key indicator of leadership more than 2/3 worldwide. We see the global leadership is clearly evidenced by medical advances. FDA approved 600 new medicines. There's no way that personalized medicines can either cause a bioterror attack because they wouldn't design for every single person, or we can develop countermeasures, burnout, checks disease, park level, 17 national kind of severe unlikely cause human extinction of 833.
To read the bioterror stuff.
No bioterrorism, let's hope, and 17 advances might create a pathogen that's not merely could create mark that last card, obviously. Could create a sophisticated weapon that's certainly not a weapon that could kill 30 million people. Terrorists tend to be conservative. They use readily available weapons that proven track record, not weapons that are difficult to develop and deploy. If you ever even contemplate biological agents that tools undertake that even most basic attacks are more demanding than student access and the crisis guarantee. Peterson 14, it's likely that the U.S. government set up emergency distribution centers where all receive antibiotics throughout the government health insurance or the CDC, the smallpox, responsible smallpox vaccination program serves as a model for universal health care. Why on earth would China just randomly launch a bunch of bioterror attacks that is nanotech fiction, and through the nanotechnology science, the more science fiction, the nanotechnology rely on realistic science because aspiration violates the natural laws of physics. Nanoscience has been too influenced by laughable science fiction expectations have gone ahead of themselves. So the weapons of high quality.
Actually read this instead.
No impact on robotic warfare. Regardless of intent, substituting robots for humans is beneficial. The robots make conventional force more effective, less vulnerable to WAD. The rebalancing make weapons much less effective. If you counter this benefit, armies deploy lethal force protect the soldiers. If only robots are safe, the nation is more likely to be used on lethal force. AI weapon are given an advantage to the US because of advanced innovations. That card's finished with innovations.
Cool.
I'm sending that real quick for all of our content.
Unfun stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that Farquhar card's marked at infectious disease, which is right after less than 4%.
Cool. Okay. The midterms DA. What climate policies did the Dems implement?
It's not a climate policy that they should implement. It's a gridlock good argument. Our argument is that it prevents Trump from rolling back, EPA
like,
regulations, and
EPA,
it also stops them from preempting state action.
Okay, so it's a question of EPA regs. What's the argument of why stops preemption of state action? Like, where does your evidence make that work?
The card says that states are doing things to resolve the climate crisis now, but because Trump is unchecked, because the Dems don't have a majority in the Senate, he's able to do things like pull out of Paris. It also says that the Dem victory itself would send a signal to the international community of U.S. intention to tackle the climate, regardless of the actual policies that are pursued.
Hey guys, so when the PIC uses global operating budgets to pay providers, how does it determine how much they pay providers?
It's a lump sums given to each hospital. It's negotiated based off of what demand and supply are in the area.
Okay, so how does that change from fee-for-service?
Well, it's antithetical. Well, it's different from fee-for-service. It uses fee-for-service within the global budget. So like the global budget, and then you do fee-for-service for each thing that's given.
So the important thing is it's like a lump sum, and it's not paid based off of the number of services you provide, but it's negotiated each year based off of like analysis of usage within that area.
So then each hospital determines the rate for the fee-for-service.
Okay, so how does that allow rural hospitals to negotiate prices that sustain them? Like the link to your rural hospitals, DA, is that they get screwed over those negotiations.
Well, the evidence is really good is that way of slashing admin bloat means that they can reallocate to community care, right? And community care means rural hospitals.
Also, the reasons rural hospitals can't survive under FFS is because they just don't have enough volume.
Okay.
Undervalued.
Sorry, one more question, which is the only net benefits of this counterplan the hospitals DA?
Yeah.
With the hospitals DA, where does your evidence say that U.S. food strikes spill over to China?
The almond card is very good. It says that food collapse happens. The pay card says that
it says food collapse happens. It says rural America produces food that feeds the
markets are
country.
globally interconnected, and it's like you want me to pull like a 2NC card for you right now? Like I can do that.
Well, like so after the 1NC, you have not read a card.
No, we have read a card. It says America produces. No, it says America produces the food that feeds the country. When there's no one to work for farmlands, food dries up. The price of food will go through the roof. Hyperinflation becomes a reality.
Where does that? It says overnight Americans will go hungry. Where does this say that Chinese people will go hungry?
Because they depend on.
Well, then so the pay evidence is about price inflation because markets are interconnected, and that card says prices would skyrocket.
It also is an empirical fact. The pay card's talking about how the Mubarak regime was impacted by the increase in food prices, which indicates interconnectedness.
Status of everything.
Finish.
NHI is only single payer. What services do you have to cover?
What services? The point is it's a financing topic.
Well, but like, if you are single payer,
comprehensive,
you have to be comprehensive. Where does your evidence say that?
That's a single payer.
It says single payers, It
says the meaning of the state functions as single payer. That doesn't say what single payer actually means. Like, how does that specify what services?
Read a card that defines single payer. We'll read a slew of cards which say single payer is necessarily comprehensive. This card's very good, clear, predictable definition of single payer.
Alright, I'm taking a second, bro.
Yeah, that's why I set up a different one.
No, it's too separate.
That then I have to use.
You can use
Someone I can share. It's set up. I can give the order while I'm doing this. It's costs, regulations, vagueness, T, the pick, the state's counter plan, the hospital's DA, and the election.
Can you say it again real quick?
Yeah, costs, regs, vagueness, T, pick, states, hospitals, midterms. All right, are we all set? Excellent. Long-term healthcare cost guarantees fast collapse of the economy. It's the foundation of growth in U.S. stability. U.S. lash out is quick and goes nuclear because it crushes alliances, creates domestic instability, and causes diversionary war. That's where Thomas evidence. The economy isn't okay because healthcare costs are so high. It's the greatest cause of instability and outweighs all other industries. Hormington and 17 healthcare meltdown would make with automotive health industry experiences minor compared to the auto industry. 0.5% of GDP. Healthcare is 5 times GDP and 10 times larger than the number of employees. All construction industry 6% of GDP, and healthcare is 3 times larger than GDP production. 18 million people are employed. If healthcare lost 40% of its jobs, it means 700 million jobs lost. That's 4 times the people employed. But the entire auto industry and industry is going to too big to fill. Healthcare will determine the overall economic picture around the world. Neither of their uniqueness cards are predictive. Ours says that healthcare will spiral out of control, which means individual cost is not sustainable. The status quo is insufficient. Antos and Cameron 17 House will isolate delivery from improving healthcare system efficiency. The evidence AC reforms slowed. The pace of rising costs is mixed at best. The national healthcare spending tops out at 2002 at 9.6%. The slowdown was not surprising. These provisions are far less consequential than proponents suggest. Organizations participate with a one-sided risk. They stand to earn a bonus for these targets, but not financially penalized if they are successful. The econ link was extended above. Trump isn't perfect, but he doesn't cause total economic collapse or withdrawal of all U.S. military security, which is the internal link to the hedge impact, which goes nuclear because the U.S. can't maintain its power, which means small skirmishes lash out and escalate. Healthcare costs was answered above. The regs advantage. Innovation is unsustainable absent value-based payments because that's the only way that companies have an incentive to develop things like precision medicine. Healthcare costs is key to the precision medicine part of our advantage. Marin 17 healthcare technology innovators are collaborating and trying to change our current reality by experimenting with AI. Healthcare has become a key industry for investment efforts of AI algorithms and improve the network data they're exposed to. There's one thing healthcare systems have in abundance. It's data due to different storage systems, ownership, and privacy concerns. There's an amount of analysis that is currently being done. Yes, there's an impact to China. Their biotech stuff doesn't apply, and neither does their nanotech stuff. But if China develops dangerous AI, it does lead to robotic warfare because the U.S. is forced to keep up, which incentivizes miscalculation because no one can tell what tech development is happening or when, which means that lash-outs are unpredictable. The vagueness argument, cross-ex checks, they didn't ask. There's no link to app conditionality because we won't change from what the plan said. The app is more than the plan. It's obviously the entire one. You see, their card is about single payer. There's no circumvention, or every app gets circumvented because no one describes the entire bill in the plan text reasonability. If you think we're reasonably clear, don't vote neg. T, we meet. The app maintains insurance via a monetary penalty. The NHI is a system that requires enrollment. The requirement can be enforced that way. NHI can be one of 3 models. 116 NHI is a mandatory insurance scheme that's provided for the purchaser. Single payer national fund requires all residents and funds for health expenses. 2-tier, the government provides mandatory insurance to all citizens and mandated insurance. The government has no such form requires citizens to enroll. The healthcare providers are provided by a public or private or a combination thereof from the purchaser. Prefer it. It sets a limit and has an intent to find. All of their terms will be contextual cards about NFIB, app interpretation, exploring enrollment mechanisms are key to new contextual app round, and their interpretation is a backdoor to only single payer, or it's single payer for any subset of the population, which means that they link to all of their limits offense because innovation won't be in the context of the financial mechanism, it'll be in the context of who it covers, it mixes burdens, and functional limits check reasonability. If you think that the app is reasonable, which it is because it's comprehensive and universal, you should vote for the compound, the pick, permutation. The United States federal government should establish national health insurance that requires enrollment. It creates a comprehensive framework for value-based reimbursement, including financial stabilization measures, and uses global operating budgets to pay providers. This is important. In the cross-sex of the 1EC, when I asked why the counterplan didn't also link to the hospital's DA, they said it's because they can negotiate the global operating budgets to pay providers. If the permutation does both of those things, it ensures that hospitals have a significant and sufficient budget to prevent rural collapse. Permutation do both. Permutation do the app, and all planks to the counterplan conditionality, kicking planks and changing planks. It's all the voting issue because in exhibiting the 2EC impossible, I have to give it against every possible 2 and R, which causes late-breaking dates that destroy class. Reimbursement is key. You haven't In Porter and 11, the reimbursement must be reduced across the board. Cuts will jeopardize the quality of the current version of the system is disconnected from cost of testing. Only reimbursement will not be enough. All the true reform will require abandoning complex fee-for-service payment schedule altogether. Payers should introduce value-based reimbursement as priors, and payers will see opportunities to achieve a true bending of the cost curve. Accurate costing also allows a cascade of opportunities. Better organization to carry new reimbursement approaches that will accelerate innovation and value creation. That's key to precision medicine. To 216, new diagnostics and not emerging in a vacuum. They result in investment of capital. The large difference between the value generated and the price they command raises the question of whether integrators have sufficient incentives. That's particularly relevant for diagnostics, as long as price and revenue are relative to value. There are incentives to develop a companion diagnostic. Current reimbursement environment does not reward innovations. Reimbursement is typically cost-based rather than value-based. Genomic health under the risk-sharing agreements with payers to secure its market price, marked at market price, but that answers all of their claims to just throw money at big data. It's not enough because it's based on cost, not value. Data is key to 216. The path of precision medicine requires access to large-scale and highly integrated patient data to advance our understanding of genomic, molecular, genetic, clinical, and digital structures of diseases. Precision medicine requires diverse data. The vast majority of repositories cannot easily be combined. In drug development, pharmaceutical companies can take advantage of clinical trials to generate hypotheses for collecting data, and clinical trials focus on testing a primary hypothesis and fail to incorporate the exploratory measures to create the learning necessary to drive precision medicine and values key to 216. The challenge in developing new medicines is never greater. Reimbursement failures that occur because the therapies are not different from established medicines. Precision medicine aims to change the economies of drug and diagnosis development through deeper understanding of mechanisms of disease driven by computational knowledge. Beyond novel targeted therapy, some of the medicines agreements benefit by line identifying healthy people who are at risk for disease. The value to society, supporting treatment and identification of whenever we treat it. Precision medicine innovation can generate hundreds of billions of dollars in value of longer and healthier lives. The state's counterclaim, permutation do both. Permutation do the counterclaim. It links to the net benefit, or the DA shields the link because it would just get perceived as state action. Fed regulatory changes are key. Our entire 1AC is about statutory uncertainty as a result of things like anti-kickback laws, which the counterpoint absolutely can't solve. Here's one card. Daniel 17. The coming decade promises an unprecedented wave of ophthalmology transformative therapies and during access while reducing costs and critical to realizing the golden value given the strivers existing regulatory frameworks or fee-for-service period that appear interest are getting interaction with WP arrangements and continue to face operational challenges. We described how legal and regulatory barriers appear to develop. What papers identified limited flexibility within the statutory and regulatory frameworks that cite impediments to DVP, the FD regulations, and Fisher communications, AKS, and NDT. We recommend significantly foster legal certainty, develop an option to be requirements until these barriers are resolved. The range of them forward slowly and within the constraints of these systems based on the value-based payments hindering the high-value technological innovation. 50 safety yet is a reason to reject the team because it skews the 2AC and forces every act to read things about what the federal government is key, which means we can't talk about healthcare, hospitals, case turns, China impact, and happens faster because AI is more dangerous. No impact 2013 is possible. Domestic problems can result in review class. Several highly likely even willingness of China's citizens and ordinary citizens to complicate virtually any measures necessary to avoid the door. Absence of structural conditions could precipitate a collapse of the PRC capacity to lead to reductive radical social change. China's issue tends to impede the PRC system with the same degree of stability that makes it quite resilient. Death by 1,000 cuts, stack 17, economics and demographics working against the small hospitals, hunting, high populations, expansive equipment, and few of the services in demand for emergency and urgent care, neither of which are bringing the revenue, all contribute to rural health care, death by 1,000 cuts, and to recruit physicians, especially younger physicians who prefer urban settings, create a bleak outlook. Many address the lack strong internet connectivity, support technology in rural areas, are harming social workers to connect patients almost like the town has given up hopes to attract more families. The dead is circular. Productivity drives rural population decline. Order 16, the population of rural America seems drastically increase the plummet of the schools closing. Local businesses failure due to lack of employees and customers. A number of changes contribute. One is the advancing agricultural technology since these states are experiencing the most rapid expansions of farming, experiencing the largest decline of rural populations. The growing West's population continues to decline because fewer people desire to move there. There's no connection between rural ag costs and costs in China being significant to trigger the impact. No impact to prices. Mean in 17, given how low food prices are rising income for low-income countries, food security expected to improve. The population is to fall from 17.7% to 8.9% in 2077. The intensity will also climb about 40%. But biotech is key. Whites at 15. Unless we make major upgrades to crop production, global demand for food crops likely double. The population will go more than 30%. Unless we increase capacity to grow food demand for food will also decline. This 2 decades of growing to be growing global demand will need to increase in yields from the cold land. We already have photosynthesis not officially efficient. Crop plants grow in a natural setting as a farm field. The inefficiency used in biotechnology will move closer to fulfilling our global agricultural crisis throughout the use of innovation. Biotechnology over the past several years has often made bold ideas that seem overly ambitious and feasible much sooner than expected. Genetic engineering will have to be part of the conversation and will certainly have to be part of the conversation. Not easy and in many areas. Major civil crop years are stagnating or even declining. The elections DA, bioengineering turns it. Down 13. Bioengineering can reduce the international community to address the issue for both technological and economical reasons. Bioengineering may be able to help. Bioengineering algae denies convert the carbon into biocrude, can remove the gas from the atmosphere, or humans can be genetically engineered to reduce our CO2 output. The research might be necessary to create vaccines for a pandemic they can't solve. There's no bill, no agreement, and no messaging. And if all they do is prevent Trump from intervening in the states, it doesn't matter because warming would be inevitable beyond that level. Meyer in 17, the Democratic Party does not have a plan to address climate change. The Chamber's outside of policy making and process does not have a consensus bill, does not have a shared vision, does not have a guiding slogan. Democrats have struggled because of substantive political obstacles standing in their way. They have not identified a mechanism for problems could be the party scrambling, even to defeat the Western Marley. Cost the party 2 dozen who had supported the loss in the midterm election. Democrats have necessary to fail only that they can ran against the climate bill. Withdrawal from Paris will be decided in 2020. Staying prevents extinction. Selling over 17. U.S. emissions at 1/6 of emissions. The climate removes the U.S. from commitments to reduce and therefore avoids level of temperature service that imperial future viability of all life and earth will be able to abide by the early future can take U.S. for 4 years. Actually leaves the real question is whether the country stays in Paris will be decided in 2020 by the presidential election. The pledge is symbolically important in assurance that the country will take responsibility for emissions. Marked emissions, not unique. Cohen in 18. The Love Your Heart is on the same line as advantage and higher turnout environment. Even though we're democratic advantage would be without precedent to ECD incumbents who can claim a greater advantage to arming Republicans how the district of Democrats failed. We were winning well in recent elections, even away from 106 for 2016. Proportions might not be enough, and proportions might not be enough.
Natalie, we need this card.
Losses in 2018 are key to liberal energy. But in 2018, Democrats may get the day if you careful, they were sure they still wouldn't be able to get much on. Democrats would be under any pressure to be an issue. History of your not going to such good options. Democrats and countries almost going to change Democrats and every word to majority. And the central movement, Democrats are seeking control would boost Trump's prospect in 2020 by giving us something against the damage to tweet for all sets against Pelosi and blame her for all manner of ills. So if you're vastly more line of attack, the benefits of losing our substantial will keep everybody saying, fair enough. Fair enough. What's in there?
Good.
Yeah.
Alright. This bioengineering solves warming card you read in the midterms. Bioengineering is completely distinct from like the types of precision medicine innovations that would result in like vaccines for people. Bioengineering is like spraying aerosols in the air. Like, why do you think you lead to aerosols?
I think that we make the industry and the incentive to invest in things like genetic technology stronger.
You think that the people who make like pills like Advil are the same people who are
I think
the
that
ones
the
that are
venture,
like buying boats to drop
I think that
aerosols?
venture capitalists that decide to invest in new technology that has multi-purpose use are similar across industries.
So like couldn't other venture capitalists do that? All right, whatever, that's fine. The
We've heard uniqueness,
permutation,
that's
the
like
permutation on
regulatory
the permutation on the tick. Your explanation is that we use global operating budgets, but you also still use value-based care, which creates performance standards on providers, and those performance standards cost the money,
okay, so
right? And that would go over the global operating budget.
But let's be clear about what the problem is, right?
Yeah.
The problem that your link evidence speaks to is that rural hospitals are forced to be funded based on value-based payments, which means when they give care to people. Hold on, can I answer your question? Which means that there is a lack of funding for rural-based hospitals because they don't provide care that's perceived as valuable under the ASP.
I'll quickly jump in here. The lack of funding is not our argument. Our argument's value-based itself is driving them into the ground.
But the reason that value-based funding is an issue is because hospitals then no longer have the solvency to stay afloat. In the world of the permutation, the grants that the AF gives to those hospitals would be able to make up for that financial insolvency, which is the link to the DA.
The grants are the same as they're in the status quo. It just eliminates overhead, right? Which means it's the same pool of money, but you're still using value-based care. You still charge the same amount.
I don't think anything about the counterplan fiat that it's the same pool of money, nor is there any argument about what?
The Woolhander evidence. You don't increase the pool of money, you use the same pool of money and then add value-based care on top of it.
For the counterplan to be able to overcome failures that currently exist in rural hospitals, it has to afford additional funding measures.
No,
Otherwise,
global operating
rural
budget is a
costs
streamlining strategy. It streamlines existing funding in grants, but it doesn't increase funding.
Yeah, so you can streamline grants for existing funding and demand value-based payments.
Which means that you tack on an additional requirement to what they would be in the counterplan.
Streamline funding in instances where value-based.
Do you think you have a card that says that it's commensurate?
I think that the AF fiat streamlined funding in a way that overcomes shortfalls for rural hospitals. The counterplan does.
The
and
only
that
way
that
global budgeting has ever been implemented was within a fee-for-service system. Because it's a way of divvying up each service to be paid on a fee-for-service basis.
And then if it's on a fee-for-service basis, then you still have none of the app.
Well,
we'll
have that debate, yeah.
In the cross-ex, you said it wasn't fee-for-service. So there's kind of like a double bind there for you all.
Now, let me see. This no prices will stay low card. This card is from 2017, and it says that rising incomes are the reason why it's increasing demand. That is our argument, that increasing demand is why food complex...
That card's global, not...
Yeah, global, yes.
That's perfect. We'll take it.
Yeah.
Sorry, the second card you read on elections I flowed is forming inevitable. Which card was that?
The second card I read on elections was... It just says, like, the Dems can't solve forming.
Okay.
So, like, Trump stuff. I mean, it doesn't matter because the counterplan, but...
DA? The pick. Elections DA. States counseling. Regulations and costs. Good. Yo. Cool. CCP collapse causes tensions, the instability of Japan, South Korea, draws in Russia, North Korea to fill the power back and force its U.S. hand, even if we're hegemon shortages means there's no incentive to de-escalate turns. The case they drop that collapse would ripple throughout the global economy. Their Thompson evidence explosive about trade interconnecting the center. David evidence says we collapse the U.S. supply chain, meaning we couldn't sustain hegemon's problems in their frustration, rocket 17 compromise. The power attribution by sex, what under stress, domestic correctly, that's execution rather than negation. They give all press to the nuclear level, use of hallucinating different execution is likely dangerous mix of missiles and procedures of risk on the miscalculated nuclear execution. The fifth channel honors and if you might understand where half the time the initial text for SR never switched to be opposition to go food price like cause refugee flows international instability great power specifically nation Nazios and the 18 refugee camps force feelings under your world issue recruited for the Taliban and food security has long to lead what is one of the great past human access and jumps and migration powers believe in self-care spam signs the risk of government develop to goose prices cost prices drive the air prices food will affect the national security great powers food will determine the war versus station nuclear use for 6 extinction deterrence 1 check 2 and 17 the 6 nations shall continue to release involved in India North Korea working to develop globally nuclear whenever these countries rainfall destroy the ocean even when other weapons cause damage to globally creating mass surveys with the population with an increased potential to gain weapons that no longer works the time frames he lash out independent cost global confidence in 17 the party side with defense systems you will the ones who appear to have legitimacy set the restoration of greatest areas of company Taiwan media side SKC the Philippines and Vietnam even leadership down which protecting accountability the interest in getting trouble class would give price for like redemption frequencies the regardless for catastrophic failure the consequences of international repercussions raising the risk of this calculation which China will be more prone to conflict China's never been a little bit on integration path we have not executive as China changes the legal integration place we were strengths independently world public health is contain is actually famines even small changes like billions round for if I believe a $2 a lesson that's spent to company to be modest rising pricing quickly become life-threatening the first way piece of evidence that China's willing to do different stuff to clamp down domestically the relationship between food security specifically to T to Z what in 17 China's act policies are explicitly intersecting national security objectives Z continues overall security concept domestic economic stability increasing effect Chinese sexual security to make recent transition puts a premium on aggressive response to external threats parameter 17 and Z will be extremely sensitive to external China's lawless and leads to the president to be more likely to oversplit to forcefully to foreign policy challenges to met private investment with agreement of voting out event they can appear weak foreign policy display state threats undermining our David evidence says they would try to restore legitimacy to the CCP by lashing out internationally was reset the swaying evidence's offense rest the next hour no small hospitals now first since when our union these kind of planning actions which was dropped in the 2 seconds there's literally zero qualifications for this evidence it says there are no doctors it doesn't say that it's collapse is a threshold for us rural hospitals that keep rent food price by South Korea's largest employer in rural communities taking out those business collapse local economies and forces rapid flight from rural areas to turns agriculture areas into quote desert wasteland shooting up food prices that's the aluminium evidence under bundle payments to provider gets paid a fixed cost based on how much it costs to average to fix a broken leg that drastically decreasing the amount that rural and small hospitals get paid because they are less efficient and treatment costs more for them than large conglomerates they are already operating on narrow margins that's the Dickinson aluminium and their evidence so forcing all payments to shift to bundle payments immediately forces dozens of hospitals into bankruptcy that's our SSI evidence rural hospitals was shut down under value-based SSI in 17 systems making deaths to attempt to address funding in rural areas for small hospitals especially one of the closer to dependent costs because the smaller operating margins get recent reports of 673 rural hospitals are currently risk for closure from rural hospitals don't treat enough people to be sustainable under value-based Oakland and Hastings is not a volume for value many hospitals do not have the volume required for medical safety it's not to get the average census with 5 individuals population low patient volume precludes most rural health organizations for space and care for performance tag officer quality vaccine critically misleading situation low patient volume of a rural hospital and 2 patient and one of the false fall rate comes in at 50% value-based care crushes rural hospitals Bellevue and 17 value-based rates and critically not payments and rural hospital revenue rural hospital payment disappointed because they have low patient volumes and limited access to resources bundle payments undergone hospital marks and forced consolidation more or less in 14 bundle payments have major impact on revenue spending consolidation close to hospital emerging faster than senior shop and beach found cards on the last day of school to insurance companies requiring bundle terms securing the right hospitals to capitalize on the programs of uneven financial impact hospital margins and cynically providers operate with shrinking margins this evidence is also generically about hospitals when our capital institutions solve they say doesn't spill over US is key Jones in 16 whose vice interconnected if there are events of different reasons to be perversely factual loss of production major societal need to extraction leads to several breast major appeal to global reasons vulnerable to self-propagating disruptions a significant majority of dependent inputs corporation result in trade and export section shocks the result of a single country major producing including the US if their Thompson evidence is correct that the markets are interconnected internationally then it proves the argument and the pay evidence is about
spikes in prices, which are interconnected via markets. They see no impact on prices. That says because of rising incomes, food security is increasing. That might be fine with rural hospitals are key to those rising incomes, which means that this is just another term linked to us. But studies prove that rural hospital closure guts rural economies, comes in 6 to closure of rural economy. In rural countries, counties, hospitals decrease economic well-being in places that can be damaged by this was statistically significant defining because important considerations of also makes involved the rural hospital regulators, places financial pressures on rural hospital regulations, pursue increased hospital efficiency, below flex economies that effective regulations induce hospital growth, economic effects, about any negative effects on health and healthcare access in rural communities because of new closure. They're key to key food hubs. Matt 14 crops have altered the only proven bodies of the agricultural changes to these food hubs, which operate in cooperative and natural progression. The cooperative ideal state better addressing needs and demands of consumers seeking local foods. Food hubs generate food results, brings now low cost year, and 13 global demands going to branch for food 50% of large numbers. That's part of a new reason for the air change. But about 6 reasons that's what it is right now. We will see more very soon. So we're going to generate results to food hub that nations products from local producing satisfy global demand, help the local markets to open us, providing opportunities that will secure regional food supply. The next argument is that bioterrorism himself versus the counterpunch sells bioterror, which is also a drop like the counterpunch that will be the one in our second. Is that impact is about short-term spike leading to G lash out. We have no evidence saying that there's a specific form of biotechnology that's coming in this out that's able to provide resiliency to prices internationally, which we said only be access to unique control into the CCP scenario. Okay. 2 and C counterplan. The United States federal government should mandate that healthcare payers and providers implement universal medical record access and analytic systems in the United States. I skipped the blockchain part. Solves data for all consisting the use of heterogeneous patient information and healthcare to make the challenge MRA, distribute information to combine integrated patient data in the UMRA, and spend to reduce malpractice the latest decision which occurs as a result of healthcare properties analytics derived from the West Bank use of lead a better process retraining. This will is a swift transformation. 2 and C counterplans are good. We get them to answer to new 2 and C stuff that's key to deter scam banking app under development, but independently getting Netflix the app can have 2 and C tricks and then sub counterplans key on unpredictable add-ons and avoid moral high grounds like we need to preserve the integrity of our elections. Concede warnings inevitable because the Democrats don't have an agenda. It's not key to Paris because the Democrats don't have the will to down onto it anyway. What's research Paris stuff is not unique offense to the counterpunch sells the lynching anyway because the generous momentum. They have no evidence that value based is the only thing that's able to trigger the lynching. States can't not vote for protections that's competition just by conditionality, which will be the one not Rex. Their AI scenario actually makes no sense. First, their core weapon says China's increasing investment in AI and genomics, regardless of whether or not they have the scientists, because they have national security interests. That was the cross-sex in quote 17. There are significant economic interests behind Chinese heavy investment in personalized medicine and advancing that personalized biotech, including possibly a combination of AI with biomedical data and genome and editing technology will help us predict genes most important particular functions. There are Kenya evidences they'll get that stuff inevitably by international tech transfer. They have no evidence that the company that did that development so will keep it internally, which proves that even if the US develops defenses against it, it spreads internationally. Can I in 17 these advances will be enabled by technology transfer overseas investment acquisition focused on cutting edge strategic technology. China's capability to pursue indigenous independent innovation has also increased and says they use AI to optimize command and control. That means it would always make the perfect decisions regarding deterrence calculations, which means you would never first strike and US would never retaliate because they know that it's a stable deterrence balance. Can I in 17 the PLA seek to utilize artificial intelligence command and control the operational and even strategic levels of warfare through intelligent assessment to decision making, which proves our Z offense is the only unique offense because humans miscalculate, but AI doesn't. Now no impact to robotic warfare. One, it makes conventional forces resilient to WD, chemical and biological first strike. That was a piece of evidence gas right at the bottom of the 1 hour, which proves it increases deterrence balance. Second, means the country uses non-lethal force like stun guns, which proves that if we see another country developing it, we don't miscalculate. This impact is infinitely in future relies on a whole bunch of conjunctive events that the US recruits enough scientists that they develop the tech to transition our entire military to robots. That the machine learning algorithm is somehow buried within an optimization algorithm for finding a cure for a disease that affects one gene, and that a company in China will develop it, and instead of selling it on the open market, secretly hand it over to the Chinese military. There's so many freaking internal links to this advantage that I'm not going to honor this with another impact card because they dropped or didn't really answer the what is he want cost. Healthcare cost growth won't collapse the economy is below CPI now, meaning the real value is declining with regard to inflation. Their evidence is projecting cost growth as a result of coverage expansions. It's leveling off now. I'm setting 17. Health spending cost growth dropped to 4.5. So one reason cessation in coverage expansions and fast growth in healthcare expenses with China's taking a while to unfold this may reflect the ongoing downshift towards providing care less intensive savings and expanding the cover practice. There are new Howard evidence that say 40% of healthcare jobs were lost. It might be bad. There's no internal link to that. This is generically about a bubble in the healthcare industry, but they have no internal link to that. Just generic cost growth and their evidence compares it to the auto crisis, which means the government would just bail it out if they're rent. Jobs will decline. Econ is strong now. GDP between 2 and 3% growth. Manufacturing and labor force growth, which are the fundamental drivers of growth, which means that even if they win internal link, it's a slow growth, not total collapse. Fed projects the strong future growth spikes from 321 Fed raise. The price and forecast more highlighting core confidence tax that's synthetic will boost the economy gain momentum, economic outlook, strengthen banks. We're staying on path of gradual rate increase protected. Take the middle ground. The size of the economy on the cost of accelerating inflation rate aspect was widely expected. Stocks were set for the policy. The Fed seems to be gaining confidence on employment expected to edge down. They just read another healthcare cost internal link, but this disproves the threshold of healthcare costs being enough enough to treat the entire economy, which means if we win that, we win the debate. Won't cause war, countries turning over down threats to justify defense cuts, incentivize cooperation to elicit aid, and select leaders based on the focus on the economy, which opens up flexibility for heterodox foreign policy that's a clear evidence. Also proves democratic checks solve the impact to deficits. The debt is $21 trillion now. Policymakers know we're trying something will be deficit, and they'll support it no matter what. There's no threshold. Back to economic effects from rising healthcare costs are negligible because it simply transfers wealth to suppliers. And yeah, as you were going to read the impact defense. We'll take that. Actually,
The second one? Yeah.
no, the first one.
Yeah, it's on the first one. I don't think you need defense for it because everyone's on the first one. The second one is the one.
So just read or yeah, read ahead. First
Actually,
section.
no, it's ours are good. I think our costs are good.
Just
Okay.
do it just in case.
When I say
That's definitely so 430. Cool.
Okay, so I want to talk about the connection between food prices in the U.S. and CCP collapse. So you have internal link evidence that says that if there was this massive spike in food, it would cause all of China to go under. What's the thresholds for why prices in the U.S. rise enough to change global markets enough to change China enough to then cause everything in China to collapse?
Okay, so the threshold is that markets are global, food markets specifically.
Right.
So if supply from the US declines, that decreases global supply, which decreases the amount that China is able to get from international trade.
Right.
So supply and demand, shifts the supply curve down, increases price. That's how that functions.
So, but the piece of evidence that you read in
Way
the
less
one-
sketchy than your AI.
The piece of evidence that you can that's fine. The piece of evidence that you read in the 1 and C is from 2011 about the huge food price spikes that happened in 2011 and how the regime knew that inflation was a huge risk for them. Why didn't that trigger the impact?
So first of all, I don't think the pay evidence is about. Oh no! It's
Yeah,
about
the CCP
the
is
revolt in
gripped by fear.
1989. Our evidence says that the
it's
Xi
gripped
regime
by
is
fear
especially
because food
susceptible
prices
to
were rising in
domestic pressures.
2011.
Mm-hmm.
It's gripped by fear. China's continued economic prosperity is by no means guaranteed.
Yeah.
Rising food price inflation is a particular concern.
Yeah.
For the CCP
For the
being
regime,
blah,
yeah.
blah, blah. So why didn't that cause the impact in 2011?
It says they're concerned about rising food prices, not
Right.
that would cause them to lash out then. Our evidence says a
Okay, so
dramatic
what's the
spike in
difference
prices as a
between the
result of
dramatic
that.
spike that did happen
Also-
in 2011 and the
okay,
dramatic
so-
spike that would
so
happen after the aft?
I feel like if we keep going down that thread, I'm gonna give you the same answer.
Okay.
That says that they're concerned about food prices. But the second part of that is we read a whole bunch of Xi-specific evidence that says he will lash out in response to domestic instability
No,
because
but so-
his legitimacy is already on the brink. and he
Yeah,
wants
so
to
I
keep
guess my
that.
question though is more about the internal link because you read one card in the 2NC that the US is key and all it says is that food supply is now interconnected, but why
Yeah.
does that mean that price spikes in rural areas are enough to spill over to price spikes in the entire US that spill
so
over enough to the
it-
point where Xi is scared?
It's not just that prices only rise in rural areas, it's that
Mhm.
rural areas are hubs of food supply, which means that the US is not able to export food sufficiently. So
Right,
the
and
card
so-
that I read about on the decoupling question says that China and a whole bunch of other countries get their food from the US.
Right.
So it's about supply, not just like a regional price spike in Ohio or whatever.
Yeah, and a few rural hospitals close, and
No.
China
Well,
can now no
the
longer.
thing
give-
is, I don't think y'all have a whole lot of stuff on the link debate, which is especially important because this means that collapse of rural hospitals across the board happens, and we read a whole bunch of pieces of evidence that says that would tube regional economies, which are
Well,
key
but
food hubs.
that
So
begs the
this isn't
question-
just like a small
That
spike.
begs
This is
the
a huge
question
deal.
of uniqueness and whether or not, the status quo can prevent rural hospitals from collapsing. If it's true that
Well,
rural hospitals
no.
are going under for all of those other reasons, the
So-
weight differential between the AF closing a few more rural hospitals seems inconsequential for food prices.
Well, so you're just saying uniqueness controls the direction. One is your evidence is about cost, which the PIC definitively solves. I think it maybe doesn't solve the other advantage as much. But second is that's just the threshold for the link.
Good. I'm gonna read word on the cost advantage and then the pick.
I can send out the modified 2NC counterclaim text if you like.
Yeah, that'd be good. Thanks.
everybody have it?
I don't use.
Yeah.
Oh. What your horse is Bernstein? There we go. That's a scary sound.
Is that you?
Yeah, that's my computer. Alright, well, my computer page is on fire. We'll know. We'll take a time out.
This was an issue earlier. Is everyone okay with like tech timeouts?
Yeah, that's fine.
If this computer actually does catch on fire.
I mean, it's also fire.
I mean, it's
Evacuate.
I would like to not die.
Actually, that's the one circumstance.
Yeah.
If it's on fire, you must continue the
Yeah.
siege.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to watch that episode. You can read it.
Yeah, we have the video. It'd be incredible.
Yeah. No, they issued a recall for this, but like a week before the NDT. So it was like, no way I'm like taking my computer back a week before the NDT.
Oh god.
So.
Wait, they issued a recall for those?
Yeah,
That's,
like
those are my work computers, so that's
Okay.
scary.
So like there's a missing screw on the
Oh.
thing, which.
Oh, great. Didn't know.
Well, certain models, not all of them.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Alright. Everyone good? No event hedge, which 717 escalation dominance superficially is appealing the concept and suffer from the source of risk, asymmetry, interest beyond combat conventional balance with parties, recognize superior multiple levels of long sinking eventual gap. The hedge run of the matchup will become even closer to balance for the deck. One side prevail, the influence of tech has to complete the concept escalation ladder continue paying for escalation harder than ever. This unless it can bounce the misperceptions. The pick! The counterpoint takes out of using value-based payment to reimburse providers. It does a redistributed progressively financed national health insurance system with global budgeting, which solves every internal link. Our net benefits for rural health, hospital closure, bundled payments, value-based payments to providers for a fixed amount, put them out of business in the status quo. Doctors get paid on a fee-for-service basis if you break the leg. The insurance company pays the doctor independently for the X-ray, the doctor's time, resettling like bandages, etc. Under value-based, they get paid for a fixed cost basis on how much it costs on average to fix a broken leg. That drastically increases the amount that rural and smaller hospitals get paid because they are less efficient and their treatment costs are more than the larger conglomerates. They're already operating on super narrow margins. That's the Dixon and Elman evidence. So forcing all payments to shift to bundled payments immediately forces dozens of hospitals into bankruptcy. That's SSI solved it all the impact within the 2C. There are two 2AC missteps. One, they dropped the advantage counterplan to solve precision medicine. A, subpoint Gromfield's an advocate for funding basic research, STEM education, financial incentive schemes, and boosting student visas and changing the regulatory pipeline. We overcome all that. B is that their Johnson evidence is just a hype person for synthetic biology. It doesn't say that value-based care is key. We just throw so much money at these companies that they'll innovate no matter what. They just said cost incentives internally. Second is that the 2AC read a card on case that said solving costs is key to innovation. That means A, if we solve the first advantage, we also solve the second. And B is that the app hurts innovation because value care jacks up admin costs. Now the first permutation, including both links to the net benefit, they misunderstand global budgeting. The proposal is a direct response to proponents of value-based care. It isn't giving hospitals more money. It's a streamlining strategy which is antithetical to using value-based payment models. One is performance standard. Value-based care uses metrics to track physician and patient performance and uses that to determine reimbursement. Global budgeting eliminates that because it causes upcoding where physicians game the system to say they did a better job treating patients in order to receive a larger paycheck, which adds admin bloat and increases costs, which in turn is the first advantage. That's the wool here in their evidence. None of this is answered in the 2EC. Second is the impact is linear. Everybody agrees that rural hospitals are on the brink of going out of business. Each additional layer cost due to value-based care decreases food prices, even contained within the global budgeting scheme. Third is that they have no solvency advocate for the firm. This does matter because we did a bunch of specific research about the distinctions between value-based care and global budgeting, and you should reward cards which are specific about the mutual exclusivity. It's value-based care is the root of admin waste, the permutation that jacks up cost hand in 18. There's a storyline that the FSS rewards volume with no consideration quality is with the FSS not from the values, not the answer. FSS has positive effects of right. The values not the cost of influence the increase of related service primary and present and has to change in utilization, not statistics, internal medicine, improve outcomes, not demonstrated healing for interaction system based on the fourth adopt the value statement. This carries that layer of the options technical infrastructure tassels and administrative level or epidemic level every dollar after dollar hour care. The doctor knows 72 to the doctor said burn is the number one cause. The burns of burn value care, wrecking the medicine and loss of revenues and controlling internally grog off 17. The change place the healthcare industry on the critical line changes are on account of the transition value. The bundle payments if left providers with hundreds of empty beds. It's doubtful that this is enough to curb the downward trajectory of many health systems. Perm do both. Cross apply all the answers above. They said perm do the app obviously doesn't solve. We read this as to, but if they meant to say perm do the counterplan and severance, it's a voting issue because it makes the neg play whack-a-mole to get disad links in CV competitions. And now Condo vote for any germane opportunity cost there. Inter artificially insulates them from competition. Kills cost benefit analysis. Innovative research is that needs to be tested against the 2EC to check the expertise gap. Their assessment is arbitrarily confined. It promotes unique offense to the plan, whereas the 2EC skews inevitable. Even the security K and deterrence DA lose to limited engagement. Good practical incentive to check one and C's, but every limit on our option is illogical. Neg, flex, key to fairness, 2EC, sandbags, key distinctions are grounded as reactionary, and they have specificity advantage, multiple options to recover from strategic tricks. Not a vote, or even if debate can be marginally better because it's always their burden to prove that they're better than the status quo. The status quo just links to their office by making claims conditional and results in illogical, unfair comparisons by giving the app too much strategic freedom. Now, the Kaplan Porter per evidence. None of that assumes fee for service with global budgeting, which allocates resources based off of admin savings and prevents provider upcoding. That's Woolhander evidence that solves cost better costs, and 313 does not view the major drivers of the higher spending. The administrative costs appear to be much higher than the average rate. Utilization low, likely to reduce the spending. The effort to reduce the price of administrative costs is needed. The spending of pharmaceuticals more than double compared to the country driven by the high price of brand name drugs. The similar work by Garber, Sanders, Reinhardt, and Anderson. Their Kaplan evidence, it's too old. They're writing in 2011, which is before the field expansion and macro, which implemented test projects for value-based care. All of our cards were from 2017 and 18, and actually says the data from implementation. Second is the warrant is that measuring costs in outcomes is difficult. The CP doesn't solve that. Value-based care is still a subjective evaluation of how much it takes to treat a medical condition, but our CP solves it through global budgeting, which uses lump sum payments. Now, their Dowso evidence about innovation, they don't say value-based payments good. It just says high prices are a good one. This is a double turn with their cost advantage. If high costs are what drive profitable innovation, then they can't solve the health bubble. Second is that we do lead to quality-based drug development cavity. In 16th, the village are developed payers using inefficient schedule global budgeting, using cost neutral programming, minimizing incentives with patients or services and volumes, and upgrade freeing resources, enhancing services. Other countries use FFS compatible with the quality and cost continuing countering the inflation sharing tendency. FFS monitoring the stream packages, practice patterns and adjusting schedules, enforcing the caps and facilitating education. At least value 117 the current payment sacrifice. Make sure the savings retaining the cost. The P4 administrators and progressively convincing evidence that undermine morality, quality, improvement, problems on the focus and bottom line. Encourage low value care, global budgets, and also need to build the individual patient services, key to reducing admin costs, retaining the current payment structure will sacrifice $250 billion, and with ACOs increase the cost to drive the budget of hospital health system. The giant corporate system validation comes about the increase in cost to $276 billion. Data stuff that Plank 2NC Plank solves it. It overcomes and also overcomes all their other solvency deficits because that Dowso card is just so good. It says that the data is the main barrier to clinical trials, which means we solve even if we don't solve the rest of the case. Now they drop the preempt to their food link turn on the biotech stuff that Saul alluded to in the 2NC. Well, the 2NC, it's the white evidence just as an advocate for increasing crop yields by streamlining the regulatory process for GMOs, but it doesn't solve our impact scenario because the app solvency is a long-term, uncertain, iterative process of biotechnology development, whereas they immediately shock the world food system. The CP definitely solves their evidence white in 15 by 2050. The demand for food will be double. Then immediately will increase the yields, which means the challenge of international grid design approach since the food disciplines higher yields motion closer to the ag crisis. Then think about the long game developing to protect us all. We can't just rely on closing yield gaps in existing crops. We need the crops that yield more. The public movement also require not only more of curriculum like this modern that's regulatory process for evaluating GMO crops.
Alright, wait. Well, the only card I need to use is the Asian. Give me a second. We'll talk. Yeah. Make sure you're going to cost it.
I'm okay on that. History.
you just integrate this quick?
What do you do?
Just integrate everything. Yes, let's do this. Yeah, with a discharge.
Yeah.
And then let's add the H defense to where it says add H defense. Okay, and make sure you go to elections because they got it down.
Can I close one or two files really quick so my computer
Yes.
is fresh?
We've agreed on.
Oh yeah, no.
As long as your computer doesn't catch on fire.
Yeah.
We're gonna read what
I'll take the 12 podium, I guess.
Okay.
Alright. It'll be the regs advantage, the cost advantage, the pick, the elections DA, and the hospitals DA. Is everyone good to go?
Grab the doc.
Yep.
It's like still scan for viruses. Whatever, I'll just read it later. That's fine.
Alright. Everyone's good?
They dropped our specific terminal impact. China's leading AI guarantees miscalculation because transition to attack is always dangerous. Maintaining U.S. lead overcomes their generic deterrence defense and prevents war with China, which was the only warrant in the which was their only argument in the 2NC. AI wasn't always stable, and their rereading of our evidence proves increasing innovation is sufficient to be able to solve. The advantage is confusing, but our cards support it. Costs. They dropped that only value-based payment sufficiently lower cost and incentivizes cheaper, higher quality care and avoids system gaming in the world of FS or global budgetary agreements. That's the calendar evidence. Healthcare costs labs grow. Their evidence is newer and indicates costs will outpace GDP, which will make deficits unmanageable. Costs are not slowing. Their evidence is a snapshot, but our evidence is our evidence announced by the long-term picture. Howard and Go's app bailing out the health insurance market collapse of the U.S. economy because it doubles the deficit. Econ strong now isn't responsive. The advantages about healthcare costs plus growth and collapse of that. The economic decline causes war, increases diversionary pressures and collapses interdependence. Decline and incentives lash out because their national incentives to go to conflict. Wants all the returns evidence and proves no domestic checks. That high proves the app is key because we're able to lower it before it becomes catastrophic. But their evidence is also too old. Yes, in fact, hegemony and de-escalate conflict and serves as the deterrent. Decline causing a great power that escalates into the use of nuclear weapons. There isn't specifically the AF internal link, which is a total overstress of the U.S. economic capability turns the DA because it provides a structural disincentive for conflict. The pick. Precision medicine investment does not work without reimbursement reform because even with money, innovators don't see investment as long-term profitable because they aren't rewarded for the value of the investment. That proves our solvency deficit to precision medicine and the biotech industry, which only long-term certainty can maintain the magnitude which is the magnitude that can see the impact. Solving advantage 1 doesn't solve advantage 2. It doesn't change anti-kickback statutes, which is federal law prevents value-based investment, which means if the counterplan works in the short term, it fails in the long term. That's our 2AC states code. There's no bloat. Our evidence says it's more effective because there will be stringent review process that focus on pacing outcomes. So doctors can't inflate a permutation, do the app, and use global operating budget that severs nothing but solves everything. The counterplan creates a single payer, which is way more than the app. It's very clearly possible to do both. It might mean that hospitals end up with too much money, but there's no DA to that. If anything, the permutation would turn out to be the app plus part of the counterplan to make up for the parts of the hospital budget that the app doesn't require. That the app doesn't cover. The proposal requires the new health program that PNHP and AD on each hospital receive annual lump sum payment to cover all operating expenses of the global budget. These federal will cover the national health program. Permutation do every other combination of the plan. It solves the reason why the counterplan solves better tunes and counterplan things or coding issue. It makes it impossible to generate often causes late-breaking debates and question depth permutation to the app and the ag plan get the accountable. That's huge defense against the DA because it guarantees long-term solvency for the ag industry. We can combine this with the first one in the 200 FLS disaster prone 17 fee for services and addiction drugs and hospital to depend on providing more services regardless of what they're Fridays paid for each individual test drive for health costs. It depends on fee for services, driver financial consequences. Patients are on the hook for a higher percentage. Cost majority of 4.3% of major work time medical costs are certain ability to pay insurance. All will have no choice but rationing care. Per person costs are crucial. No one costs free. In Carolina 18, the U.S. spends twice as much on healthcare as other industrial countries, totaling 3.3 trillion. 17.9% of gross domestic product. The price is stupid. People use the same amount of pay a lot more research looking at 150 conditions. Personal health is spending 930 billion. A huge increase for our patient population. Size 18 explain less than half of our vaccine. We've actually gone 180% more time in the hospital. No, that leaves the part of those services. Do we do more? Did we charge more? These account for 60% of the increase. There's more for value-based pricing and scheme investment incentives. Gilman, 17 addressing fundamentals go hand in hand with 2% drugs on the basis of the value as GDP increases. So society's ability to pay, creating a virtuous cycle. This is one. There's one for the innovation for strategies for young people. So whatever concerns about free riders, high cost innovation can be might be transferred from one single thing from one system to the other. Once our outcomes value-based pricing architecture on way to find value, they invest in innovation when they foresee positive versus just work in innovative products. I've seen the benefits of create their own markets. Those will be sustainable. Only payers offer customer cost defining will have the economic multipliers that improve population health and productivity. Midterms. They conceded a straight turn. Biotech solves warming. Only app solves the industry writ large. That encourages generic innovation. The impact is so big that a small internal link outweighs to a certain extension. Our card wasn't warming inevitable. It was Trump messing with states inevitable. It proves uniqueness why we need technology. No new 2NR answers. It makes the 2NR impossible and ruins 1AR strategy. Hospitals. There's no uniqueness to their turns. Economy is collapsing now. Innovation sucks. They don't solve all famine ever. It's not unique in more turns. The connection to the total ad clash is continuous. No internal link card. There's no spillover to global economics. No impact in CCP. They won't lash out. And there's always choose cooperation over CCP. Instability. China 15 prediction. I have been proven wrong. I believe still leave business in China. They move. Ask them to avoid corruption, which has nothing to do with development. Students go back in China. Anti-corruption campaign is successful. The public supports growth must be even relative sense. There's no reason to believe China economy cannot overcome our crisis. It's permanent to believe that legitimacy only on economic forces. No longer education, environment, corruption, legal justice matter. Just much let's lose. I fear like let's represent entity consumption, lower expectations, must lead to every social intention, decreasing the possibility of regime plot, no reason war, baby, unless 15 years of war. It's specific for alone countries and nations, upsetting the status quo, lead of all China, the region on the brink of balance, power, stability, one side of preponderance, force China's not going to invade Taiwan, let alone Japan, over the tweets, China's not having capacity, and will never. But I think China might threaten its neighbor, technically impossible, downright to China capability will drive neighbor, into American campaign, able to expansion is automatically self-defeating. China can for hope, control the system. I know one particles, humans has any just including the fundamental stability. The reason no one's working Chinese talk to American powers this reason a sturdy bastion of influence of power. Rural hospitals have been closing since 2005 because of low population. Georgia's immigration policy, labor shortage, bad infrastructure. That's exact evidence. Demographically, we can treat which are all taking rural areas face demographic, social, and economic because of the pollution and loss of major push out the operation industry, the rise in employment, loss of economic difficulties, that's why recession with the displacement of the jobs, many don't left hand leading to further population decline, creating a population with needs worker shortage over 6 health professionals for to live in a working in urban setting. They receive higher wages and access abundance of resources. Many feel they cannot sustain practice and hesitate about their lifestyle. Most medical working side fault. Let's say working in urban places. All the best evidence points to long-term declines in its GDP. Our cards say the last 2 years of efforts answer their food hubs internally. Please, they're not necessarily anything global. At least 10 years, meaning 70. The international food prices are projected to remain low and stabilize over the next 10 years. We're funding low energy prices in less areas than in a number of countries. Domestic prices move independently of international prices, especially grains being 70 areas combined. The bulk of the time, most countries have prices projected to remain low for the next 10 years. Incomes are projected to rise. FCD is expected to improve 2027. The number of food insecure people is expected to fall, but by 42%. True of every region, meaning 70 all regions are projected to see notable improvements with the biggest in Asia.
Okay, we have 4:30.
Can you write up this? With the 2AC card also, just like if prices are fun.
Yeah, I'll try to get it.
DA. The pick. Elections DA. Costs advantage. Regulations advantage. Good to go? Everybody? Okay. Food price spikes go nuclear. Every piece of evidence introduced every state leader having incentive to maintain domestic stability. G last is out of response to the Africa. A support its probability their miscalc explanation, and the one is the only place where scenario because she is a faulty leader, but doesn't apply to theirs because AI is not. A is cognitive bias. Trump is paranoid at China's intentions. Small missteps cost for a second. It creates views or lose pressure for G because he knows he'll be ousted anyway. And lack of food makes escalation and no cost option because the alternative is starvation. Now, crucial delineation. This does not require the collapse of the CCP. Just that G doubts the credibility of his leader, or that domestic, or that his polling numbers go down, etc. This is like a diversionary lash out. And the uniqueness internally, which means they could be right that the CCP generally maintains stability as a party, but if Xi doubts his approval ratings, and that would cause lash out. Third is land-based missiles are super susceptible to first strike, which means your arsenal is on high alert, which means a small accident can immediately trigger an extinction, means we can turn their impacts, but not vice versa. Fourth is empiric Germany, Japan in the 30s, air uprisings in the 90s all prove it worsens refugee flows that independently lead to extinction. That was the second piece of evidence. Is another piece of points magnitude. They dropped the two down inside India, North Korea, etc. Get drawn in. They're all and then they're all on the bubble nuclear states, which independently kick up enough in the atmosphere to cause a nuclear extinction. They have no specific internal explanation for who the U.S. last sought to in response to economic crisis. You have to default to us. Then the second they drop the starvation impact. The Brown evidence says that you have to default to relative probability 3 billion people a year die because of starvation, and U.S. food production is the key internally, which said you have to default to us. Now we do turn the economy. Their only answer to this is the economy is low now, so there's no uniqueness for the turn. That's fine. We may not have unique offense because of this turn, but it certainly means the act doesn't solve any of it because they did not contest the argument that food prices are key to the U.S. economy. That was the piece of the piece of evidence in the 1C that says that it's a major export test, and then it's a major export of the U.S. It's key to the supply. It's key to the supply chain in a whole bunch of countries. It's like a huge amount of the U.S. economy, which proves that it decreases production domestically. Means even if we have sweet healthcare, there are a whole bunch of other things that collapse. And now the impact defense, we're the only. They say it's not key to the global economy. We're the only piece of and the team that recent piece of evidence on this are Jones and Phillips evidence says the loss of U.S. production turns capacity of other countries to import, specifically West Asian countries. It says that China would not be able to sustain domestic production. Now they no impact to CCP stuff in the Asian war, but bonus evidence says no motive exists now. Price spikes obviously turn that into great use of loose pressures. The North's evidence says he thinks he has the response to domestic legitimate crisis is to lash out with adventurism. He believes land grabs in Taiwan, India, the SES, and the Senkaku says even if leadership doesn't generally win conflict, it will cause a civil military schism that independently causes it, which proves that and this is unique offense for us. They say rural hospitals are declining. Group at first is the kind of unsolved. If you think it doesn't solve perfectly the cost advantage, it solves enough of rural hospitals through global operating budgets to generate a sufficient amount of revenue for rural hospitals to be able to sustain their operations. Now the two pieces of evidence they read in the 1A and the one piece of evidence they read in the 1C neither come close to saying they're the death knell of rural hospitals. All of our evidence prices that in and says that rural hospitals have narrow operating margins because of worker shortages in the status quo, which proves this is the threshold for a link argument. But value-based care is the death knell to it because they don't produce value in the traditional sense. When they say there are a whole bunch of health boards that monitor the process, they're strictly evaluating what contributes to value and what does not. That is measured in the cases of volume, and they've considered that rural hospitals do not have enough volume in order to generate sufficient revenue within that. Within that, that was a piece of SSI evidence. I read the 2C, I read like 7 pieces of evidence that all of the worker shortages just prove that they're on narrow operating margins, which lowers the rank to the link. They say food shortages now. Well, first is the bioterrorism subsidization plan. They kind of sufficient to solve that. Second, they drop lash out as a short-term impact, which means that even if CRISPR is able to solve the long-term something, there's no piece of evidence that it's able to sustain that. But third is CRISPR exists in the status quo. I can pay $130 for it if I really, really want to. Pick. Fee-for-service with global budgeting solves care better. The root cause of the cost is administrative waste through the shift in value-based care, not utilization. Fee-for-service with global budgeting moves away from the perverse incentives of value-based care, which pushes doctors to upcode and invest in unnecessary capital projects. They're -1. There's only we have comparative evidence about what parts of health markets actually contribute to cost of administration caused by value-based care. That's our Pino, Calista, and Ahana evidence. Second is these are vastly more qualified from a peer-reviewed JAMA study. Third, this means EPIC solves cost better by excluding value-based care. It's a straight turn to the first advantage. You can vote on that and take the accountability if you think the perm solves the net benefit. Their 1AR cards don't apply. A Pearl is terrible. It's about current fee-for-service. Doesn't assume global budgeting, which creates creates constraints on cost growth and allocation of hospital funds towards care instead of capital investments. That's a Will Handler evidence. Second, it's from a Forbes article. Our evidence is citing actual peer-reviewed studies, and their fact evidences our argument price per treatment is too expensive, but it's citing our JAMA study says that utilization due to FFS is not the problem. Proves they can't themselves because it doesn't assume global budgeting. They dropped the plank again from the author that says the federal government invests billions into precision medicine research and STEM development. No reason why this is bad for the economy ever articulated sufficient to solve their state's plank. Doesn't take this out. The government's offer funding is certain, and it doesn't assume the rest of the capital, which expands government insurance, which access is the reason why payment reform is good. Global budgeting solves. Drop the gap in the evidence that shifts the fee for service from a focus on utilization to quality that aligns the incentives in the right way. Cost internally matters much more. That was their card on case data plank. We can see that internally got with the rest of the app. That was the 2EC card. Drop the plank. It kind of harmonizes all data shares that the pharmaceutical companies to overcome clinical trial hurdles. They drop their counter information that we get in response to new 2EC solves suggestions to our counter plan, which was the data utilization stuff, which means it solves the sandbagging offense, but it's a reason it's key to negative flexibility, which was conceded impact on conditionality. It's key to respond to 2EC tricks. Drop the double turn argument. All of their cards say value-based care is good or because of high prices solving for pharma development. That's a double turn with the first advantage. You want to see Gilman evidence says growth is and then it's enough to generate investment in pharma proofs that solving the cost solves that advantage. The other warrant is creating a market for their products. The kind of solves that through universal insurance. Their Garrison evidence about creating a reimbursement system like patents. That's not the same as performance standards of the app. The permutation links to all of our offense about and then value-based care being bad. They've conceded that physicians gain the system and that independently narrow operating margins mean that they're not able to sustain operations because of the overall low amount of volume that they have. The elections just had the biotech solves forming stuff is solved by the subsidization plank, and they dropped that. It's a loss now, which motivates momentum for 2020, which is solves for Paris, which solves for warming. This is not unique offense cost advantage for the count plan solves that. But it's the regulations advantage. This internally makes no sense. First, the AI, the offense, they dropped that. It's not better for command and control. Their evidence says China will integrate it into their command and control systems, which means they will not miscalculate because because it's a perfect command and control system. But second, it's based on a whole bunch of conjunctive, really weird internal links about U.S. innovators somehow being able to solve for Chinese precision medicine and not dispersing it internationally. All of their evidence says that China's developing these innovations inevitably, which proves that they don't solve.
Sorry, costs of regulations advantage. Okay. Hospitals. You all set? Okay.
I'm good.
All right.
Any risk of the cost advantage outweighs an almost non-existent TA. We have a terminal impact that massively turns everyone they've read, because if the economy collapses, the US doesn't have the ability to do things like sustain food imports, create cooperation with China or any other country in East Asia, or maintain its military power abroad, which means that any sort of war that they've isolated is inevitable. It means the US goes to war in places like China, where it has military presence abroad, in Northeast Asia, Africa, everywhere that the US's presence matters, collapses because the US can no longer sustain its military funding, and the economy collapses trade. That causes quick miscalculation because the US has an incentive to lash out when its economy is declining, because they no longer cooperate with other nations and they perceive themselves as weak. The conceded impact should also outweigh, because of time frame, we've read uniqueness about why healthcare prices are collapsing now, and a small risk that the counterplan doesn't solve in the short term means that the burgeoning prices are sufficient to cause a total collapse of the economy. We read a piece of 2EC evidence that says it overcomes all alternative causes, and it's the determinant of growth in the long term, which should give you some confidence that short-term investment and value-based payment matters, even if the counterplan could create some sort of financially stable system in the long term. The regulations advantage. I'm not going for it, but I'll concede that some sort of AI-based war with China. No, I'm not going for it. I'll just concede the defense. Check. Reimbursement isn't enough because doctors and providers still have an incentive to control costs. Providers and payers want to bend the cost curve to their advantage because doctors and patients always want to provide more care. Patients and doctors aren't on the hook in the world of the counterplan, which means that they're always err on the side of more care. That's our Pearl and Caplet evidence. The way that the counterplan works is it would have some ambiguous way of allocating funding to cover all of hospitals' costs, but hospitals report costs based on the care that they provide. And every piece of evidence that we've read in this debate says that when that care is provided without taking into consideration the payments that are made by both the patients and the doctors, it is inefficient. The 1AC solvency evidence impacts this well because it says that insurers are better at driving value than government monopolies. It creates excessively broad patient populations in which doctors have an adverse incentive to continue giving all necessary medical care, which one, link turns all of their administrative cost arguments, because in the world of the counterplan there's an infinite amount of funding because the hospital gets to choose what amount of money they need to cover current costs, but two, demonstrates that the counterplan is more cost effective in the short, or the app is more cost effective in the short term because the counterplan applies massive new amount of spending that requires bloating budgets and encourages hospitals to over-report the amount of costs. The only two pieces of evidence that they have read comparing fee-for-base service and fee-for-value service assume a perfect system, not the implementation of the counterplan, but our evidence speaks to the way that doctors and patients would respond. It's not only about current fee-for-service, but comparative about the transition from any system that uses fee-for-service or a fee-for-value. But even if you think that solvency deficit is very small, it doesn't matter because the permutation solves the vast majority of their offense in two ways. The permutation to do the AF plus the plank of the counterplan that gives all this money to hospitals and the plank of the counterplan that does this food stuff solves the vast majority of their TA in two ways. First is you should look to the 1NC solvency evidence in the counterplan. It says that what the counterplan would do is just pay healthcare organizations operating budgets. That obviously requires a separate implementations of grants and funding than the AF. The way that the permutation would operate is that private insurers would be reimbursed based on fee for value, but when that didn't cover hospitals' operating budgets, the plank of the counterplan that mandates a different set of money to cover operating budgets would fill in and ensure that rural services no longer have deficits. They do not have a mutual exclusivity argument besides that it links to the DA, and you shouldn't make any sort of severance claim for them because it simply was not in the 2NR. That is a reason why the counterplan plus the AF necessarily compensates for disparities in rural budgets. Second is their white evidence is very good on describing the way that by 2050 global demand for crops will double and we can massively increase yields by short-term investment in GMO crops, even if in the short term there are some minor price spikes. That solves the vast majority of their offense in conjunction with the other defense I'm going to go for, because in the long term the permutation is a huge investment in the way food operates.
Judge kick.
The judge can't kick the counterplan. That's impossible to get the 2ER.
It means I have to get the 2 hour against 2 strategies. It also means that all of our econ stuff just outweighs the DA because they dropped an advantage. Hospitals. We have impacts defense to both of their terminal impacts. One is that the CCP will launch out. Our 2EC evidence says that the leaders have an incentive to avoid any sort of clash because they want to maintain domestic stability. Even if short-term price spikes cause some danger for China, it doesn't mean that they want to attack the entire world. This is especially true in the context of uniqueness. We've heard evidence that food prices have already spiked and they're unstable in the status quo. There also isn't spillover to Asia war writ large. We've heard evidence that this deterrent solves any conflict, which means even if China does lash out, other countries have an incentive to cooperate, especially when the economy is growing, because they want to maintain things like trade flows and domestic stability, and they know it'll only hurt their own regime's survival if they're to lash out and create war, which proves interdependence is the only scenario for conflicts. There we have uniqueness for the econ turn that only the app solves, because healthcare will collapse the economy in the long term, but they don't have an internal link to overall econ collapse, even if food price spikes in the short term. This is especially true since they've conceded a lot of app evidence that points to long-term decline in food scarcity. Productive capacity is increasing and prices are projected to stabilize. Domestic shocks do nothing to impact farmers, like income increases or farmers other countries be able to fill in. Emory has a card 0 on why the U.S. producing grain in some rural areas is key to overall prices or food production, and we have 5 cards about the way that food prices are sustainable in the status quo. Even if they're right, there are some minor price. Our evidence says that there is long-term oversupply, which demonstrates that there aren't enough food shortages to incentivize Xi to go to war, and proves that the global market is stable enough in conjunction with long-term investment in genetic engineering, in conjunction with the fact that the permutation supplies thanks to rural hospitals.
there an app card that you're pointing to for this prices don't? Sorry, I didn't realize I had headphones. Is there an app card you were pointing to for this prices don't spill over internationally? Or
No, just an app
okay.
card.
Gotcha.
Okay, congratulations to both teams. It's a 2-1 for Emory.
Alright, I sat. I voted on the permutation. I think that the permutation shielded enough of bullying to the dissab in combination with the we should throw tons of money at tech to grow more food later. Shielded enough the dissab for me to feel comfortable voting on the permutation. A lot of, like, the 2 and R was just like links to the DA. My problem with that, I read a lot of your link cards and it was like, most of the problems were like, doesn't have enough volume to like run efficiently. A couple of problems I had with that: one, obviously the app would mean more people go to the doctor. 2, I think that the 2AR's characterization of the permutation, it's just like we'll cover their operating costs, definitely shields, if not mitigates, most of that argument, because it means that it doesn't really cost them anything to treat them. Also, I think that the gaming argument that gets sort of talked about in debate, I'm not really sure what to do with that, because I'm not sure why, if they game the system, why the hospitals wouldn't get more money that they keep running. So that stuff in combination with the like combo perm, I think was sufficient. The other thing was the 1 and R was like, in fact they said perm to the counterplane. It wasn't perm to counterplane, it was combo perm. So like, at least unless I misheard you, because you were like, it's severance, and I was like, I thought I heard them say combo perm. So yeah, I mean, maybe that was just a mishap, or maybe I misheard something, but okay.
So I like agree with a lot of what Rich said, and I was thinking, I spent like most of my time just thinking about the perm, because I could easily see a way that I vote for it. It's just like you give like double money basically, like you do like your funding mechanism, and then also like toss in like do their funding mechanism too, and that like obviously solves the internal link, like all of their link stuff. I ended up not doing that for a few reasons. So the 2 and R says on the perm, it uses the same system but with narrower margins, which would hurt them. Now it doesn't say mutual exclusivity there, but it does seem like there's like a strong, like an implicit argument that the things are different and we can't do both of them at the same time, or like that's not what the counterfund is supposed to be doing. And I also thought that lined up well with what I thought went on in the 1NC and the 2NC cross-ex, where it's like they say they're not a new pot of money. It's the same like funding streams, it's just how it gets distributed. So I also think that's a plausible reading of the perm text, which is like you do your stuff with value-based reimbursement and then also do global budgeting. But I don't think that means that I think I can see a reading of the perm text that's like we do value-based reimbursement within the global budgeting system that just adds on requirements and it keeps like the same pot of money the same, and that causes all of the like physician like burnout and all other bad stuff.
Because the counterfund creates a single payer system. That's what all their evidence says. So obviously that requires some funding stream that the app doesn't. So if what happens to that money in the world of the perm? Like the exclusivity argument, to be frank, seems to be coming out of thin air to me. The 2 and R was like, did not say that.
So, I mean,
I personally very much agree that the counterplan and the app are mutually exclusive in like a very capital T truth sense, but like when the neg doesn't make that argument, I just don't understand.
So I thought that, I thought they had enough of like, well, I guess, so the second part of this as well, I think that either they're mutually exclusive. If, I just don't think you can use value-based reimbursement within, like I couldn't figure out how that would fit together. And the second part of that is that even if you did do that, I don't see how the 2 separate funding streams would solve any of the cost stuff, which it's like you spend like double the amount of money, so that like clearly doesn't solve any of like the inefficiency things you have in the 1AC. And the 2 and R does like right above the perm say that like the value good stuff is a double turn with them spending more money. It certainly could have been in a different, like that argument could have been applied in a different context, but I thought there was something that was, like I thought that could fit in right there. So like again, like there's a big caveat, like I don't know what all of these types are, like how like the single payer funding system would be different from that, but it seems like the one, like the 1NC and like through their cross-ex, they're like, we do the same, like we don't create a new funding stream. These are just everything is just the same as it is before. We just use global budgeting instead of like value-based care. And I just had a lot of trouble trying to put that together. And like
where does the money for the counterplan come from if there's not new money?
It's
like,
they just say like here's how stuff like
the whole thesis of the 1AC is that people take advantage of the fact that they're not held accountable for receiving more treatment than a hospital can afford. And so if in the world of the counterplan, they just fund providers to whatever they say their costs are, or even some sort of like a valuative mechanism that happens over the long term, how does that not require some sort of financial mechanism that's in addition to the app? Like, that seems very Plan Plus to me. I understand why the mechanisms are distinct, like I very much hear what you're saying, but I also feel that the counterplan necessarily has to use revenue that the app does not. And so why can't the perm capture that revenue?
So I think that the revenue, I don't think they have to say like they create a new revenue stream. I think they say like we use global budgeting, and then that's like how we organize how like money that goes to healthcare now gets sent to healthcare. And you're like, we do this other thing with how like money that is sent to healthcare now gets sent to healthcare. I'm in agreement that a lot of this is like I just like couldn't figure out how to put it all together, and I certainly like am more like truthy, and I kind of care more about that thing than other judges. Like I totally get that you're like upset about this. I just couldn't figure out how this
maybe I didn't articulate
fits.
this, and
Yeah.
I can see this, but it's like value-based payment in the context of the app is a mandate that the way that private insurance operates is it's reinforced based on the value of care. What the counterplan does is it creates a single-payer system by which the government uses this global financing mechanism to reimburse hospitals for their full cost. So those operate differently, right? Like one mandates the way that private insurance reimbursement happens, and one reimburses providers to the federal government. So if after value-based reimbursement happens, hospitals' full costs aren't covered, why doesn't the permutation mean that providers' full costs are then covered?
So is this like the plan the plan does like private stuff, and on top of that it also adds on the federal government giving lots of money through like global budgeting as well?
Yeah, I feel like that
okay.
Like I very much hear what you're saying. This feels like a 3 and R to me.
I mean, I think like that certainly could be like that could be the case, and I can see like that this is like a separate thing they're adding on top. But I also could see that the counterplan is saying like there is like stuff we are giving to healthcare. This is like a different way of giving stuff to healthcare that's not the same as your thing. And even if they are combined, it's just like I don't know, the cost thing just. I don't understand how even if you did both of them together, that would solve the cost stuff. But again, like I don't know a lot about what's going on in the topic. So like it certainly could be like you're right, and that the single payer. Like maybe if I was thinking more like single payer is different, you can just add that in on top of whatever else they do. But like it would help if you just like said more of that, just like describe that more in the 2NR, like the 2AR, because like I thought the perm, just like going into the 2AR, I thought like the perm was the thing you needed to win. And like I don't know how a lot of these things fit together, so a lot of like how I think about what they fit together is just based on cross-X and like what happened earlier in the debate. And it seemed to me that they were like this counterplan is like very clearly different from the AF, and you can't put both of them together. And they didn't say the words like mutual exclusivity. What?
That's a claim, that's fine.
Well, I know it seems like they're different. I don't know how you put them together. Like yeah, that's okay. And I'm sure that I get where you're coming from. I feel like if I had voted the other way, I would have had a similar conversation with Emory where they're like, how does this make any sense? Like, how can we possibly combine these two things? Like we have said, like throughout like cross-X and like in the 2NR, like this is the same like pot of money we're working with. It's just how we distribute it. So that's how like I came down on it. I certainly could be wrong. Do you want to hear the other stuff? Okay. So I spent a lot less time for the rest of it, or the rest of the debate, just because I was thinking about like which way do I go in the perm. I do think the disad, like I guess the other part of the perm where you do like long-term stuff, I don't think that solves like the short-term like the food price spikes that G could then lash out with. And the main reason is just like the 2NC and the 2NR just spend like a lot of time on like G, like this is different. Here's like a bunch of little tricks we have, and I think the 1AR should interact a little bit more with those, and same with the 2NR. So for example, like the no collapse stuff, or I guess like your impact defense, like no collapse stuff. You're right that like even if the CCP doesn't collapse, I think that like they've got some good cards. Like G is different, and he's on edge because he's really concerned about legitimacy. So like small effects could have larger have larger influence. The 2AC evidence, or the 1AR evidence, was a little bit better about just like stability in general, it was a little bit better about even if it's not going to collapse, they're not going to do like silly lash out things. But I still don't think it's like about agriculture or like what poor people generally think in China. The Asia War card was a bit better. Like China's probably not going to do silly things, but there's just like a lot of like the 2 in C and the 2 in R were like they've got generic stuff. Here's like our nuance, and then just got past that.
Like, for the perm, like hurts our
yeah, yeah. It's just like there's just like not enough time.
I think
for the other stuff.
Oh, there's some solid steps into the counter plan.
So I got that with less time left. I think there is some, but just it's kind of I don't really know how to compare these two things. I think they've got some good stuff on like maybe they're not just giving like the amount of money the hospital wants, but they have got like some like fancy algorithm that's like gives out the appropriate amount of money, and they've got some cards about that. I'm not sure how many of your card or how much like your cards assume their version of global budgeting, and again, like I could just be like making this up and maybe reading like way too much into this for them because I don't know like what actually like the truth is for this, but it seems like they're like our form of global budgeting is better. It can solve costs coming from a variety of areas, including like admin costs, which I guess are bigger or important. They can there's like other you still might gain speaking well.
No, it's fine. I just was wondering if you thought that like given what your feelings about the perm of different 2AR for you could have just been solvent services to the counter plan and then the like maybe spending 4 minutes on the add DA changes things.
I mean, that certainly could. I think the easiest thing is just talk more about the perm. Just say like here, like go preempt every possible thing that like I could maybe do for them that I ended up doing in this case. Like I don't like the perm was the thing I think you should have gone for. It's just that the amount that you had there, I felt uncomfortable telling Emory that this is what I voted on before or voted on. I think like that was like a much easier path, I think, than the other stuff. But like, sure, I think the other stuff could have been winnable. Some of that, a lot of this is again coming down. Like, I don't really know like the difference between global budgeting and then your AF stuff, but that should help you because then you can just say like, here's why, like the key distinctions, and just like talk pretty in the 2AR. Yeah. So I think like either option would have been fine. And it seemed like on the perm, it seemed like they were different or mutually exclusive, and I couldn't figure out how to like put it together in a way that would make sense and be able to explain to Emory. But again, like totally understand if you're upset, and that's probably fair.
I get it.
Yeah.
It's like on the end of 2AR. Sorry if I was upset. But
I mean, it's also
I just
yeah.
feel like it's a little bit of extrapolation, but that's
okay. Yeah.
I understand. You have to extrapolate for someone.
My decision was similar. My big difference is I did not understand what the solvency deficit was to the counter plan. And so I sort of wound up thinking that the permutation resolves everything but is more than the counter plan, and I default to less, which I'm sure is frustrating. I just basically felt like I had to read a big old stack of cards, and their evidence was much more clearly comparative than yours, and everything else was kind of a mess.
So yeah, presumption argument?
Essentially.
Do we not default to that? And like,
sorry?
We have to, on presumption.
We have to say like, we were after they introduced a counter plan, presumption goes out when they do that.
I mean, the way I see debate is just like, I vote for less change.
Yeah, that's fine. I should have said the counter plan's obviously fucking way more change, but
well, sure. Well, I should say, I think that, so I should say the other important element to this is I think that they win a turn argument to the affirmative, so that like I would not have voted for affirmative, like just, I think counterplan was better than AF, so I was really only thinking about the permutation, which is more than counterplan.
Okay, but so what would have changed that for you?
If you had spent a lot more time explaining like exactly what the difference between global budgeting and fee-based service was, because I thought your evidence talked a lot about like fee-for-service stuff, and I didn't understand why that was the same as the counterplan, which could fully be just like my lack of topic research.
No, I mean the counterplan is a little bit different from fee-based service. It just includes fee-based service. I just think some of those cards say that value-based payments are good, but I also, yeah, I mean that's fine.